Welcome back. Energy security and energy transition are two topics which are taking center stage at global conferences. Manisha Gupta caught up with Joseph McMonigle, Secretary General of International Energy Forum, at the India Energy Week. He spoke about energy security in 2023, the potential of India as an investment destination, the changing map of energy supply, and more.
When you look at energy security as a theme, how does 2023 look to you?
Well, I still think there's a lot of uncertainty, unfortunately. We have uncertainty on the demand side. We have all this narrative about the recession and what might happen to the global economy. Although now we're starting to see GDP numbers being adjusted now because it looks like it may not be as bad, but we don't know. There's the whole question of China reopening. Is it real? Is it not real? We think it is real. We saw the data back in November already exceeding pre-pandemic levels. That was even before the zero COVID policy was revised. So we think there probably will be extra demand because of China reopening, and we'll just have to wait and see on the recession side. But if China does reopen and India's economy still continues to thrive the way it is, I think we could be in a situation where we're in a supply crisis in 2023. We have to make sure we learn the right lessons from the energy crisis. And I'm afraid some people want to just pin the blame on Russia as the reason for the energy crisis. But I like to remind people that we were in an energy crisis even before the invasion of Ukraine. Now, certainly the Russian invasion of Ukraine has added a premium to prices. But I think if we don't learn the lesson about a lack of investment in hydrocarbons while we pursue the energy transition, I think we're going to see high prices and volatility as the new normal. And this is something that really concerns me.
This whole conversation, especially with India Energy Week, there is this talk about ensuring that there is a balance on fossil fuels and renewables as well. And none of this is underinvested as we move towards the energy future from here on. What's your sense on where we are onto that?
Well, I think Prime Minister Modi and the government are actually doing a very good job here, actually showing others around the world that it can be done, providing modern energy services to its citizens while at the same time focusing on affordability and sustainability. So I think it's really important. I think we're talking about learning lessons from the energy crisis. I think the rest of the world can learn lessons from India on how to approach this. And, definitely, our organization is worried about energy security, stable markets, data transparency. So, we've always been focused on it, but really energy security is now a term that's back in vogue, if you will, and everyone's talking about it. And, you see some countries around the world completely flipping their energy policy to try to deal with it. But the repercussions are real and very consequential because, number one, you have all the affordability and price volatility types of issues that we talked about that aren't good for the global economy either. But it's not also good if you're concerned about the energy transition and climate. And that's because if prices get too high, you see some countries move to higher carbon, like coal, for example, sources. Even in Europe is using a lot of coal these days because natural gas prices are so high. So we're moving backwards, I think, on some of that. But the other area I'm concerned about is if you care about the energy transition, you have to be concerned about high prices and underinvestment in hydrocarbons. Because if the public starts to connect high prices and volatility with the energy transition or climate policies, we're in real trouble. I know in my country, in the United States, on an issue like this, once you lose the public, you never get them back. You don't get another chance at it. So we have to be very careful. We can't, we're not going to go off a cliff here if we don't, manage and transition the transition, I think, is really important.
Surely. Would you also say that there's this whole oil map, energy map, so as to say, seems to be changing now? With Asia, Russia, India and China buying more from Russia now, those numbers clearly have changed so much in the last couple of years. And even as we talk about renewable energy, that really is concentrated in very few geographies right now. So whether it's about China, Australia, Africa in some sense, that is where you have the most metals and minerals which are required for green transition. how do you see this changing map, and would you say that we shouldn't get comfortable where we are and this perhaps would continue to change?
Well, I think there's still a lot of uncertainty about Russian supplies, but I think up until now, we haven't really seen, when the war started and sanctions were put in place. I mean, first we should note that when the war started and there was discussions of sanctions, the global community said, let's leave energy off the table, right? So, because they were worried about it's a global energy market and it's going to impact other parts of the world. We moved past that now, and then energy became one of the sanctioned areas. So when that happened, there was a lot of speculation that prices would spike, a lot of Russian supplies would come off the market, but really that didn't happen. Maybe about 500,000 barrels came off the market. So really what ended up happening was trade routes were revised. Instead of Russian crude going to Europe and the US, it was coming to Asia. So I think we're still watching this and seeing it very closely. I think most analysts that we talk to are concerned about, in December you had the EU ban on oil, but now you have this ban on crude, on products. And I think a lot of analysts are worried that the Russian crude and products, especially in the diesel area, are really important to global product consumption. And so what we could end up seeing is that having a bigger impact than the sanctions on crude, and particularly this summer, when of course that's the high season for driving in the US and Europe and other parts of the world. So it's the wrong time for something like that to happen. So we have to watch it very closely. I would say I think the jury is still out on the repercussions of that.
Sure. I have a couple of questions on India now. The PM Modi, when he spoke today, talked about a lot of opportunities in sense of investment, whether it was for gas or hydrogen or solar for that matter. How do you see India as a destination? Because the consumption numbers are high. How do you see India as a destination for investments?
Well, huge opportunities, I think. The transition is not just important to achieve our climate goals, but it's also important if you're pursuing economic opportunities. And I think the next Googles of the future are going to come from energy technology companies that discover or invent some new technology or maybe even some new dramatic fuel type. So we're here in Bangalore, right? It's the Silicon Valley of India, and I think the innovation and the money being invested in a place like this, that's human talent that's here, India can play a real pivotal role in helping us, see these technologies be matured and actually help, kind of the global, cause on climate change and the energy transition. So for me, it's very exciting to be in Bangalore and at India Energy Week. I think there's a lot of, as I've been walking around looking at the different exhibitions, there's so much going on here, and it's exciting to see as someone who follows the energy transition quite closely.
So I'm going to squeeze one last question. So when you look at 2023, and this perhaps is a bit of a crystal ball gazing, what do you think could be an opportunity or a challenge going forward in this calendar year?
Well, I think we have opportunities on the energy transition and climate front. Last year, Egypt hosted the COP meeting. It was the first time in Africa. This year it will be held in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. And so I think 2 years in a row of the COP meeting be taken out of Western countries or Europe, I think it's healthy because it forces us to listen to other voices. There's more inclusive dialogue. There's important voices to be heard in places like India, like Asia, like the global South. And in Sharm el-Sheikh, they started to make sure their voices were heard, and I think that will happen again at COP. And I think, so this is...
Okay, on that note, it's a wrap on this edition of Commodity Champion. News continues on CNBC TV 18 after this short break. Stay tuned.